Hi, a quick video on the difference between the I and E sound. I don't do very much about pronunciation with my students in general, but this is important because it really does make your English sound foreign if you get this wrong. I recently did a talk about the most common mistakes that foreigners make. It was the top 5 mistakes, actually. And the other 4 were connected more with grammar, but one of the mistakes which I've noticed, which foreigners make, which makes your English sound foreign, if you like, was that students of all nationalities, pretty much, when they speak English, foreigners tend to use the long E sound instead of the short I, as we do in English. And the reason for this is because most languages, including Polish, they use the long E sound for the letter I. And in English, we tend to use the short I sound for the letter I, as opposed, as I say, to most languages. To give you an example of this, this is interesting. There is no long E sound in that sentence. This is interesting. Most, even advanced speakers of English, foreigners would pronounce that with a long E. They would say, "It is interesting." Can you hear the difference? That sounds foreign. "It is interesting" sounds much more natural. There are a couple of other sentences, for example, "Keep it simple, stupid." Keep has a long E, but the rest of the sentence are all short E's. So keep it simple, stupid. The letter I is usually pronounced I in English. Another example would be, I'm a James Bond fan, and in the 1970s they would quite often have foreign-sounding generic villains. The word villain, by the way, is another example. Villain, not villain. Villain, the bad guy in the James Bond film, and he would quite often have a generic foreign accent, and the generic foreign accent would quite often be shown by having the character pronounce the letter I as E instead of I. So he would say in those 1970s James Bond films, "Good evening, Mr. Bond. I have been expecting you." Sounds foreign, doesn't it? But a native English speaker would say, use short I sounds, "Good evening, Mr. Bond. I have been expecting you." I'll put some what we call, I'll say a few, I want to keep this video short, I'll say a few what we call minimal pairs. They're 2 words, one with a long E and one with a short I sound, which are confused very often if you mix up those 2 sounds. I'll put them, all those sentences and words, in the comments section below so you can read them. Here are a few. Chip, as in fish and chips, and cheap, as in not expensive. Fish and chips both have a short I sound. It's incorrect to say fish and chips, that's foreign, fish and chips. The word cheap, however, not expensive, has a long E sound. So fish and chips are cheap. His, meaning his car, and he's, as in he is, he's English, it's his car. His has a short I sound, and he is, has a long. So he is English. English, by the way, has 1 letter I, but has 2 short I sounds. Not English, but English. So he's English, because his car is a, what's an English car? It, or eat. It is interesting. Eat fish and chips, because they're very cheap. And one last one, the famous one is of course ship or sheep. Ship that you sail on has the letter I, so this is the short I sound, ship. Bit like the Polish letter Y, I, ship. You sail on a ship, but you get wool from sheep to ease, and that is the long sound. So there is a difference in English. Ship, it is a sheep. That's something you get wool from. That's an animal. It is a ship. That's something you sail on. There is a clear difference in English. If you remember that the letter I is usually pronounced in the short I sound in English, two E's together or an E and an A together are quite often pronounced as a long E, it will make a huge difference to the sound of your English. You will sound much less foreign, simply. I will put all those words and phrases in the comments below. Hopefully that was some help.